All right, let's dive right into this explainer on Bong Joon-ho's 2019 absolute masterpiece, Parasite. Today, we're going to see exactly how this brilliant film takes something as abstract and honestly as complex as class inequality and turns it into a devastatingly physical space. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know it's a completely wild ride, but when we actually break it down visually, the true genius of its structure really shines through. So here's our blueprint for today. We're going to cover 4 key areas. First up, the illusion of mobility. Next, the architecture of spatial inequality. Then, we'll uncover the hidden labor machine. And finally, we'll break down the meaning of that completely unresolved ending. Section 1. The illusion of mobility. Before we even get to the characters, let's establish a really vital lens for everything we're about to talk about. By biological definition, a parasite is an organism that lives in or on another species, benefiting entirely at the other's expense. Keeping this super strict definition in mind forces us to ask a question that the film literally refuses to answer simply. Who is actually feeding off whom? Because we're going to see how 2 remarkably different families navigate the exact same social opportunity structure, but in completely different ways. And this brings us to the core dynamic at play. On one hand, you have the Kim family. They're incredibly clever, highly adaptable, yet they're crowded into this damp, semi-basement apartment, basically operating as a highly resourceful survival unit. Now contrast them with the Park family, who live in this pristine, modern home designed entirely around space and privacy. They're completely insulated by their wealth, but, and this is crucial, they are utterly dependent on hidden labor to maintain that comfort. So it's this stark contrast, right? Sheer precarity versus total insulation from the real world. It's wild because the first half of this story almost plays out like a fast-paced heist movie. For the Kims, economic survival requires constant, exhausting class performance and role-playing. They infiltrate the wealthy Park household one by one. The son, Ki-woo, acts as the initial bridge by becoming a tutor, and from there, their success in this new environment relies entirely on supreme confidence and improvisation. They survive by perfectly performing the exact roles that the wealthy system expects to see. It really proves that access is almost entirely about the illusion you project. Section 2. Architecture of spatial inequality. Now, Bong Joon-ho does something amazing here. He maps social hierarchy directly onto the physical environment. Right up top, in the Park house, you have the highest status. It's all comfort and wealth, defined by sunlight, wide open space, and total privacy. Drop down a level to the semi-basement where the Kims live, and you're in an economic limbo. It's totally precarious, you've got partial visibility to the street, exposure to the elements, and it's physically crowded. And then, at the very, very bottom, there's the deep basement, the bunker. This is the hidden, forgotten tier. Complete darkness, deep secrecy, and total isolation. Every single time a character climbs up or walks down a flight of stairs in this film, they are literally navigating their exact level of social power. But here's where that performative illusion we talked about hits a massive brick wall. Smell. Smell is a boundary that class performance just cannot hide. Even with the perfect clothes, perfect lines, perfectly rehearsed acting, the physical reality of that damp, crowded semi-basement clings to the Kims through their scent. It's an invisible boundary they simply cannot wash away. It's the film's brilliant way of telling us, hey, you can fake a university degree, but you absolutely cannot fake your way out of the deeply ingrained physical realities of poverty. Which brings us right back to our central question. Who is the real parasite? Now, as we descend deeper into the structure of this explainer, and please consider this a full spoiler warning for everything that follows if you haven't seen the film, we have to confront a shifting reality. Because, the title feels very one-sided at first, pointing a big finger at the Kims, but the film is about to complicate that idea in a genuinely terrifying way. Section 3. The hidden labor machine. Let's plunge right beneath the floorboards, into an atmosphere of absolute dread, because this gets to the dark heart of the story. The Park house isn't just a beautifully designed setting. It is literally a machine for concealing the people who make that comfort possible in the first place. That terrifying mid-film reveal of the original housekeeper, Moon Gwang, and her husband Yoon-se living down in the deep bunker, it exposes a chilling truth. The park's pristine, sunlit comfort is entirely powered by a hidden labor economy operating completely in the dark. The Kims might be parasitizing an opportunity structure, sure, but the parks are parasitizing labor they don't even have to look at. And notice how this realization maps directly onto the film's genre DNA. I mean, we start out with this deadpan comedy and slick social maneuvering, right? But then, the exact moment that bunker is opened, suspense kicks in. That suspense sinks into a very dark thriller, and by the climax, it fully descends into outright social horror. These radical genre shifts aren't just a director showing off. Bong Joon-ho is making a huge argument here. Class conflict isn't just some abstract, polite debate. It's messy, it's unstable, and it's often quite absurd, right up until the pressure cooker explodes and it inevitably turns catastrophic.
Think about how the massive rainstorm beautifully and tragically illustrates this inescapable spatial inequality. For the wealthy Park family, the rain is, what, a minor inconvenience? It ruins a weekend camping trip, sure, but they get to come home to a beautiful, cozy view of the rain falling on their manicured lawn. But for the poor Kims, that exact same rainstorm means total destruction. Their semi-basement floods with raw sewage, their lives are completely displaced, and they're forced to sleep in a gymnasium with hundreds of others. Different weather means completely different consequences, entirely depending on where you physically sit on that spatial hierarchy.
Section 4, Meaning of the Unresolved Ending.
So, this massive structural collapse leads us out of the floodwaters and into the emotional and physical aftermath of the tragedy. The violence at the garden party wasn't just a random slasher movie ending. It was the logical, completely inevitable result of a world built on separation, denial, and profound humiliation. Wanting upward mobility in a system that is fundamentally rigged against you can become a deeply toxic source of pain. The son, Ki-woo, is left totally trapped by his aspirations. The film demonstrates that. Yeah, everyone inside the system is adapting to it, but the ultimate cost of that adaptation falls incredibly unevenly.
And that leads to the crucial takeaway from the film's conclusion, which is honestly a harsh reality. The final dream is not a solution. It is a coping mechanism. At the very end, we see Ki-woo drafting a letter, fantasizing about making enough money to one day buy that house and walk his father up from the basement. It really looks like hope, doesn't it? But the film exposes it as an impossible fantasy. It's just a tragic, psychological mechanism for surviving an impossible reality. At the end of the day, he is still on the outside looking in.
Because Bong Joon-ho forces us to realize that the individual families aren't really the primary issue. The house itself and the systemic inequality it physically represents is the true villain here. Which leaves us with one lingering, extremely uncomfortable thought to end on today. If the structure remains completely unchanged, if the stairs are still there and the basement is still completely dark, who will be the next parasite?